Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. John Wilson just gave me the signal to start the program, and we're starting here at allpointstv.com, and we're doing another 1 hour presentation on the program called What's Going On. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are delighted that you're going to tune us in and take some of your time to pay attention to what we do here, and we want you to pay attention to all the programs here at allpointstv.com because all the programs, and I can speak from personal experience, work hard behind the scenes. You only see us on camera. But before we go before the camera, you'd be surprised of the hours we put into the program before you see what is really the finished product. And I really have some idea what they're doing in these major studios. You know, we see them on the air for an hour, and we think that those guys getting all that money, and there they are doing an hour program. They do it 5 days a week, and then they're off for the weekend, and they're doing 5 hours. But those guys in the studio, quite frankly, from the very beginning of the time the studio starts, you see some others on the air, but they're behind the scenes getting ready for their program, and they're putting really like an 8 hours into it, probably prior to the program coming on the air. And that's what happens here. We spend a lot of time both in studio and out of studio preparing for the program. And if it seems like we're only standing here for an hour and then we're out the door and we're not doing things to prepare for it, I think that's the wrong conception. I can see how it works in the national studios because of what we do here. Anyway, we are back again for another hour. And we are really delighted, honored really, that you're here. And I want to give a shout out. I think that's how they say it. I don't do too much shouting these days, but they shout out. They shout out to. I guess if you shout, you can be heard in the other studios. But I do want to say something about Rod Eccles, who we did an interview with a couple of weeks ago here at the studio. We had a phone hookup and talked to one of the radio broadcasters out in New Hampshire, and we hope to do a lot more of that. We want to talk to some persons in other studios and other programs they're doing, and it was really quite a treat and quite an honor for me to talk to someone that was another conservative. Called him Rod Eccles is his name. He does a radio program out there in New Hampshire from 8 o'clock until 10. 8 o'clock p.m. to 10 p.m. And he was telling us that he does this program Monday through Thursdays, and that he is he broadcasts himself as, or he taunts himself as being the number one constitutional black conservative in the country. And he was telling me that he's gotten some umbrage from having declared himself to be so, but I did find him to be constitutionally grounded. And I thought quite refreshing to listen to, quite frankly, because when I want to hear a conservative that is constitutionally grounded, I'm pretty much listening to myself. I mean, I don't run into a lot of people that really understand what really is not I mean, it's not like 2,000 pages here like it is in Obamacare, where you have 2,000 pages, nobody can read it. Nobody in the Congress read it before they passed it.
So that was the most absurd thing. I mean, those guys didn't even know what it was in there, or allegedly didn't know. And there's that chant little, you got to see it, you got to pass it before you see what's in it. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna go order furniture, not knowing the price. I'm gonna have it delivered, and I'm gonna have to have the money in hand when it. I'm gonna have that much money there, Nancy.
John, isn't it ridiculous?
Was a stupid thing, you know.
I mean, they come out and tell us that they didn't read it. I mean, Nancy Pelosi wasn't shy about it. She came out and said we had to pass a bill in order to find out what's in it. I think you at that point you have to get these people out of office.
John Conyers, rolled his eyes and acted so disgusted when people asked him about. Of course, they didn't read it. Well, it's like, it's like that's your. If you didn't write it and you didn't obviously read it after it was read,
what are you doing voting on it?
What are you doing voting on it? And if you don't read it, if that's so time consuming, we can find other employment for you.
You know, I don't even know how they go back before the voters. You know, the members of the House are elected every 2 years, so it's like, it's quite a quick turnaround in terms when they're up for re-election. And these guys will tell us that they didn't read the bill and they passed it anyway, and it's now affecting the whole nation. And it's not like a 6-year term like for the senators where you might forget some of that stuff. But this is 2 years in the running. And I think Pelosi said that in the year of that election, I think that was an even number year in which she made that comment that you have to pass a bill in order to find out what's in it. That's an insult to our intelligence. And
we accepted that. And American people accepted that.
They said that to us, and it's like, it's like water rolling off the back of a duck. There's oil in there, and the oil glands, make the oil, refute the water. But it's like water rolling off the back of a duck. It doesn't stick. The America has become the Teflon political community. And nothing sticks. I mean, they say things to us as absurd. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is this absurdity of the Washington Post article that just got through writing about, and I'll get to that later on in the program. And we will talk about some of the things they're saying to us, and it's an insult to us. And we are taking these insults, and some of us not getting it, and they just simply telling us that they expect us to just buy anything that they say. But if you're passing bills that you have to pass in order to find out what is in it, we might as well not even have anybody up there and just let people write stuff and pass it in there. We can
I'll tell you what, I'm going to
save $174,000 for each member in the Congress.
I'm going to ask Nancy Pelosi to give me her and her husband's credit card numbers, and so you and I could buy whatever we want, and we'll tell them after the fact how much we spent on their money. I'm sure they would accept that proposition,
Which is what they're doing with our tax money. I mean, if they're doing that with the bills they pass, then what are they doing in terms of these appropriations that they're doing? I mean, that's why that's why when I get ready to, when they get close to May, and we're voting on Proposal 1, where the state government is asking us to, they're so nice. They're asking us if we will tax ourselves. So they want us to go to the polls like we are a bunch of idiots, and they want us to impose a tax on our own purses. They're afraid to do it, so they're asking us to do it. And I'm going to be out front on this issue, because what I'm going to be trying to say with the little influence that I have with the 5 people listening to what I do, and say that let them find in a $54 billion budget $1.3 billion of fat to pay for the road service in this state, which we've already paid for, by the way, in terms of all the fees they assess against us. The fuel tax, that's 6 cents on the 6 cents sales tax on the fuel, and a combination of the taxes that go into every gallon of fuel that's purchased is 19 cents. Of that goes to the state, and then you're paying for your driver's license and registration fee of your car, and all of these things. And they're telling us that they need us to vote a tax against ourselves to pay for the road service. We already paid for the road service. We already paid for the road service. But they want us to impose a tax on ourselves, and as if we are out here not getting what it is they're doing. They're telling us to put a tax on ourselves because they dare not, as politicians, put any more taxes on us, because they're taxing us to death already in terms of all these other these hidden taxes.
I don't
including our speeding fees. That's a tax also.
I don't see that most people actually examine what politicians say. Like you do. You examine it, and that's what see. Some people would say, and I could see their point. They're saying, well, at least they're putting it on the ballot so it could get more popular support or more popular rejection. So maybe that's democracy and works. Okay, it worked, but I think the overall fact is they're gutless. They're gutless, and you want to say you told it. That's what you wanted. Okay, and I do think that when it comes to property tax issues, stuff like that, you should have skin in the game. I'm going to step out and say you should have to be paying taxes to decide if more tax can be passed on those who pay it.
Yes, exactly.
And
right.
I don't think it's fair that a person who has nothing should be taxing people who have something.
It is another one of the absurdities that they rely upon in order to maintain themselves in power. They love the idea. If you look at how the structure, like the tax structure we're talking about, And when you look at how it is actually factored into the political process, what the national debt is they put a tax on the next generation so that there are no political consequences and repercussions and ramifications of it in the present. So they're actually borrowing. People talk about how rich this country is. They're borrowing from the prosperity of the future, and they're borrowing that out of the future so that they don't have to do the additional taxes, which if those taxes are raising more than they already are, those guys are out of here. So they put the tax on the people that are not born yet. And certainly the ones that are born, they're not voting, they put the tax on that part of the population. They don't dare do it to those who go to the polls and voice an objection to it. And that's what they're doing with this tax. And they're trying to put on the people of the state with this having us to vote and voting what amounts to, it really won't raise $1.3 billion. That's what they need in order to do all the road service, and then the 5,000 plus bridges they have in the state. Many of them are in decadent condition, and it would take about $1.3 billion. What they are proposing, and proposal one will raise about 830 millions of dollars of that. It won't cover the whole cost. We get close to it, and they can come back and tell us about the shortfall, and they'll apply some money over here to this and some other things. But it's amazing how they're so devious and deceptive in how they go about hiding their hands. They're throwing stones all the time, but they hide their hands in it. And one of the key ways they do it is inflation. I mean, those products that you're paying all this money for comes out of the fact that what they've done is they devalue the currency by, printing debt, because the currency is really part of the debt of the country. And they print more of the currency, that's, in other words, putting debt out here in the form of greenbacks that don't have any value, not backed up by anything, and they dump them into the currency stream, and then you go to the store trying to spend these counterfeit pieces of paper. Well, they've counterfeited the currency, but you better not try it in the basement of your home, or they'll ward you off to jail because they don't want any competition in the counterfeiting of the currency. But so that's what that is about. And you go to the store trying to spend this worthless money, and guess what has happened? With the currency being devalued by the federal government, which devalues the currency, and you go to the store trying to spend this worthless paper, and it's driven the price of the products up. And you blame the person that made the product and don't see the hand in back of it, which is these politicians that have made those dollars worthless. And I don't even call it money anymore. I try to buy what I have to buy in the most immediate time period, because I'm holding on to worthless paper, and this paper is becoming more and more worthless the longer you hold on to it. They've outlawed any profit you can make on it through the interest rate by making the interest rate zero, so you get killed there. And then they take the value out of the dollar that is in the current stream, because they're putting more dollars out there in the currency stream, and that makes the value of the dollars worthless that's out there. So you have to, get this money. If you have anything that you want to buy in the long range plan, you get this money out of your hands and buy it now, because the money becomes increasingly worthless the more time it goes on. And they hope you don't catch them at that. But what I'm not buying on the state level is that we don't have $1.3 billion of fat in a $54 billion budget. I mean, I would have to believe, and there's no way I'm going to believe it, but I have to believe that the government is as efficient as it can be, and it cannot find $1.3 billion of fat in a budget that's bloated at $54 billion. And that's a bloated budget as it stands, but you can't find $1.3 billion of fat in a $54 billion budget. I'm not buying that, because I know how inefficient government is on all levels, and that's federal, state, and local level. There is no efficiency in government, because government doesn't have to be efficient in order to stay operative, because government's not going anywhere. Business will go in and out because they have to deal with the profit factor. If they make mistakes and are not able to be efficient, then the market punishes those entities, and they go out of business if they're not efficient. They have to be efficient in order to remain profitable. You can't stay in business if you're not profitable. So it's built into the process, but in the government process, it's not built into that. They come back and ask us for more money, as they're doing with Proposal 1. And I'm not buying it. I'm be out there campaigning against it. So go ahead and be aware of that right now, and let me see if anybody going to audit me for having said that. But I have already, I already shown them that I dot all my I's and cross all my T's. And when they come at me trying to get me to pay some more money, harassing me, what happened the last time they did it, and they did it twice in the same year, and they had me down for paying $25,000 more in taxes. And I ended up getting back more money because I know how they operate. And so I consciously make it a point not to claim all the residual income that they owe me. So if they come with this nonsense, and that's all it's about is nonsense. I mean, government's a gun. And it's not negotiation. It's not compromise, all that stuff they're talking about. Government is a gun. And I understand that. So what I do is make sure they don't have any excuse to turn the gun on me. And I don't want to get off on that, but that's just on the QT and running what we need to understand here. And this Proposal 1 is absurd. And I plan to help people understand how absurd it is and get them to understand what they need to do about it.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
And that is get the politicians to come out of the woodwork and make them bring the gun and show it to you.
Okay, can I ask you a question, though? I mean, the charge that every time I bring up taxes on Facebook, all the liberals decide to tell me that I got to have a civics lesson there. They try to just list all the things we use tax money for. So, I mean, it's like, and I usually say something snotty like, thank you for the civics lesson, but that's not the reality. No, see, if the United States stops saying, I attack Israel all the time, and that's my personal thing, because Israel gets the lion's share of foreign aid. It does. It gets anywhere from $7 to $11 to $12 million per day in direct aid to Israel. Mm-hmm. So people say, well, why do you attack Israel for? Because they get the largest amount. Then we have to give around Palestine money because they have to placate them a bit because their Jews are getting this much, the Israelis. So then we got to do this. But I think all foreign aid, I don't see the benefit from that. I don't see it. I don't see how that gives us any kind of. They laugh at us. They know it's our attempt to try to buy friendship. They step around it all the time. They do questionable things with the money that we give them. They do horrific things with it. We're basically. I mean, would you, if the American people say, "Hey, we want all of the foreign aid to be ceased," maybe just humanitarian aid on occasion where there's earthquakes or natural disasters. Just like medical supplies. Would you say now pull that money? I'm not a social person. I'm not a person who likes all these social network things. Social safety nets. But I could see that we could take care of all of our problems and solve a lot of our debt crisis if we stop sending money abroad. Like especially when we're borrowing so much from China and other creditor nations. Mm-hmm. We're borrowing 60 cents on every dollar from people who have not our best interests at heart. Mm-hmm. I think it's an absurd thing to keep on trying to be charitable when we're borrowing money to be charitable.
We didn't send them up there to spend taxpayers' money on projects that they think up on their own. We sent them there to govern this nation. This president is talking about, for example, taking the Iranian deal, which we have a constitutional direction of how that process plays out. He wants to carry it before the United Nations. And about the monetary part, we have not voted a single politician to give a dime of our money to foreign governments, which really just pays for their influence in those nations. We have not asked for that. That's what they're doing.
But another thing is, too, NPR makes it sound like these 47 senators who opposed it or wrote that letter to Iran, they're saying that is a thing because the president, it is a question, it's a horrible thing because the president has sole discretion on, and I'm saying, my friend told me this, and he's not a liberal, but this is what he was hearing on NPR. Look at the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, you told me that, showed me from last week. And I said, that doesn't, he's got to get senators to approve of that. I mean, he can't do this unilaterally. He cannot do this by executive order. He cannot do this,
John, under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, this president should have been impeached a long time ago and tried in the Senate, and they should have had, if they really were following the Constitution, should have removed this man from office. There are so many violations of the Constitution, which really, according to Andrew Napolitano, and I do buy into what he says here, and that is that the Constitution is in exile in this country. And there's another book out that verifies what Napolitano says, but anybody can see it. There's a book out called who killed the Constitution. Can I mention who they are? The members of Congress, the government in Washington, D.C., that's who killed the Constitution. And they're not following any of it.
Like even Lawrence Tribe, who was usually on the left politically, he was involved in ACLU and stuff like. He also changed his mind on the Second Amendment and came on board that it actually is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. But he even says the EPA is doing things now that is totally unconstitutional.
Oh, that's why they have the EPA. They have the EPA and these other the networks set up that many of them are set up so that all of them are set up away from the ones that are constituent based, because if you have the ones who are the policymakers, that's who we send to Washington. We elect the policymakers to go to Washington according to the Constitution in Articles 1, 2, and 3. And there's only one of the politicians that are national, that's a national politician, and that is the President of the United States. The others are state representatives. Should have been the ones that are elected in the state, and that is the House of Representatives and the members of the Senate. And the idea was they will be accountable to the people through the electoral process. Well, what they've done is insulate themselves away from that process by, in fact, extending out to other units that they control internally, but we have no access to them. And they have them making all these decisions, like you said, the EPA, for example. And that's by design. And they are here making all these decisions and not answerable to the public. But let me go back to one of the person we put in office, that we have a remedy to rein in what he's doing under Article 2, Section 4. Article 2, Section 4, and I'll quote it for you, and you go and check and see if it's not there. But in the second article, which is the article that sets up the executive branch of government, that's the President of the United States. There's only two sections in Article 2, and it ends with the fourth section of Article 2. It's really a short part of the three branches of government that's set up. There's only two articles in there. And Article 2, Section 4, which is the last part of the Article 2, says, and this is the impeachment process, it says the president, it actually names the officers, the president, the vice president, and then it says, and all civil officers of the United States. That means all the ones who are holding office in the federal government. These are the civil officers of the United States, shall be removed from office upon impeachment for, and listen to these words carefully, and conviction of, you see there's a conjunction here, upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's the total language of Article 2, Section 4. And the two-tier process is that you have impeachment upon impeachment for, that's in the House, and conviction of, the check and balance system inside of the Congress, and that is conviction, which takes place in the Senate, which is a more difficult process, which is why Andrew Johnson avoided being removed from office in 1868. I don't think he should have been impeached upon that charge, by the way. There could have been some other things, but I don't think he should have been charged with the impeached him for, which was removal of Edward Stanton. Johnson trying to move Edward Stanton, the Secretary of War, from his cabinet position, but the position the Congress took was that if they had to approve his appointment, then therefore his dismissal should have also had to come before the Senate as well, and had the Congress having some participation in his removal. I don't know where that's written in the Constitution. That's certainly not a claim that can stand up under the mandates that are in the Constitution, but they're not following it even in that particular case. And it came within one vote of removing Andrew Johnson from power. They did impeach him, but they didn't convict him because of the two-tiered process. That's what I was trying to give you in terms of the language upon impeachment for and conviction of. It takes both processes in order for it to be carried out. But we have not even impeached this president, and he goes on and does more and more. And I'll tell you something: if he carries this agreement with Iran to the UN and gets it approved, and does not carry it to the Congress, specifically the Senate, to get it approved, he should be impeached. Not only impeached, he has to be removed from office. I mean, how much of this are we going to take? And then everybody's playing games here. John mentioned the 47 members of the Congress, the Republicans. You don't know Democrats are going to sign on to it, because that's how this process works now. We don't go by the Constitution. If you're a member of a certain party and you do things that's extra legal and extra constitutional, then that's fine if the party that you represent is going to be the ones that has the same thing to say about it, because they're not going to rescind it because you're part of the party. I mean, that's the old boys network. But if they're worth anything, and they're not, then any person that violates the Constitution, because that's the oath you took. You didn't take an oath to support the politician. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. So any person that violates it, whether he's in your party or not, that person has to be called to heel and be taken to account for the violation. But when have we seen that play out over the last how many years? And I, quite frankly, can't remember when it played out. What I see is partisan politics up there in Washington on all things, and then within the party itself, any decision made by one of the two parties that grows the power of government, there's no party in Washington against that. And so, on the one hand, the 47 members of Congress have signed that petition, signed that letter that went to the mullahs, the four mullahs that run Iran, because the Iranians don't have anything to say about it. The mullahs are running Iran. And these tyrants, they sent a letter to them telling them that the negotiation that they're entering into with Obama will not hold any water necessarily once Obama leaves office. And even that is flawed because it doesn't hold in the water whether Obama is in office or not. But that's them. That's what they're doing. They're playing politics. Because Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, let me read this to you. This is Article 2 that sets up the executive branch of government, and then it does what it does in order to bring about the restraints. And in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, which ends with the impeachment statute. It ends in Article 2, Section 4. It ends at that point for the second article, and it ends with impeachment. So there's a statement being made there by the framers, because the framers were aware of this proclivity of those in power to want to abuse their power, and they knew that it would be more likely to take place in the executive branch. Why? Because of the singularity of it. You have check and balances inside of the Congress. It doesn't operate the way it's intended, but you have each of the members up there supposedly going there to represent their own constituency, and they are trying. So they're supposed to be responding to those who elected them. And so if John Doe does in one state what is not in the interest of Sally Doe, can I use that? In another state, then that person would balance out the other person. So it's supposed to be a check and balance within these two networks, although they're balancing off each other, because you have to get the approval of the other branch before you can have the bill sent to the president for his signature. So it's a check and balance all over the place, and none of it is operative right now. But they ended with the impeachment, and they put it in the second article because that's where the likelihood of the three branches of government getting more out of control, because you don't have anybody checking on the authority within the branch of the president, because the president is singular to that institution. He's the president. and who's going to check on him within that branch, and who bring him to heel. So then they put the impeachment in that particular part of the Constitution. But these members, these members of the Congress, I'm not impressed with them. I mean, I give them credit for. I mean, you can't deny that they did send a letter to the mullahs, and you can't deny that what they told the mullahs is in fact true, but it's not the total truth. They're talking about it will hold no water. Any agreement they make with Obama will hold no water once Obama leaves office necessarily, and saying potentially you have signed an agreement that in the long run may prove to be bogus, but in the short run is bogus. You have to go to the Senate to get the approval of any agreement, because they don't intend they didn't intend for the president to singularly set this country into an agreement without having something of the representatives of the people to say about it. And really, these were the representatives of the states. That was the intention. The president does something on the federal level. The idea was, okay, fine. Now take it to the Senate, where the states can have something to say about it. Because don't forget, we elected the senators by state legislatures up until 1913 with the 17th Amendment. See, they don't expect you to understand any of this. That's what they're doing. They're doing things, it's not just passing a bill so we can find out what's in it. All we have to find it out. Not all of us voting on it. They're voting on it, but we're all finding it out after they passed it. But they don't expect us to pick this up, because they don't expect us to follow the hand, the hidden hand.
You know the reason why is because they want us now to succumb to the cult of personality. This is different. This is doing. Obama. Obama wants this. How dare you? Obama can walk on water. Obama can heal the sick. He can pay people's bills miraculously. You could throw that thing away. Obama's in power,
Throw this out the door.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, because let's face it, all rules are undone. Everything in place was done because it was racist or whatever.
That's a whole different. I posted on that. I did a 2-part series. You have to read that article I did, folks. I did a 2-part series on this piece that came out 2 days ago. The Washington Post put out an article, and they were saying that they want to get the narrative straight that hands up, don't shoot. They're saying it never happened, and they said in the article they want to get the story straight. And here they're telling us this. Now, how many months has it been? It's been 7 months. Michael Brown was shot August the 9th, 2014. So just got the months up. 7 months later, here comes the Washington Post that tells us that it wants to get the story straight 7 months after the event. Yeah, give me a break, please. You want to get the story straight and burn the community down in Ferguson by this bogus claim that you and others in the media made, and got people fired up in the street. You fired up, they're out in the streets, instigated by the media, carrying a noted, bold-faced lie that any child would have known was nonsense. But the media ran this narrative. I knew it was a narrative. I knew they were running a diversion when the way they framed the issue. I mean, it's unarmed black teenager. Look at all this explosive language in that. I mean, none of that stuff is relevant in terms of being unarmed. So what? I mean, what was he doing? Because if you look at what he was doing, he would not have been unarmed long if he was able to take the officer's weapon. So they would give you misinformation even in that. Then of course there's Gentle Giant stuff. Once I saw those things in the first narratives that came out, I knew then we were on to a diversion. And then the Gentle Giant part to mitigate against the size of this individuals, where they were telling you subliminally that he posed no threat, but he's 6'4" and weighed 290. If that guy is in the vicinity where you're standing and he's not in a cooperative mood, then his size poses a danger. They mitigated against that and mitigated against the conclusion that was a danger by telling you how gentle he was, which had no place in the story because he wasn't acting gentle. You saw it in the video. And when the video came out, you had people trying to deny that was Michael Brown wearing the same clothes they were wearing out there in the street and laying in the street, and there were those clothes he was wearing, but that wasn't him. Because there was a narrative running, and now they're talking about They want to get the story straight. And we up against that type of thing and trying to bring about accountability in this country because all the citizens are operating to keep us misinformed and keep us misdirected. Let me say something about another matter in this discussion. I was reading last week. I have to take my hat off to these. I have some respect for others out there in the media that are trying to bring about accountability. And none of us are doing it perfectly. But I listened to Glenn Beck last week, and they had this big brouhaha about Glenn Beck has now said that he is no longer a member of the Republican Party. What was he doing in the first place was my question, but okay, that be as it may, he was in there because he believed, this is not religion here, he believed it, didn't know it, had no reason to act as if he should believe it. There was no evidence he should believe it, but believed it nevertheless because politics is a religion to some of these people. See, if you believe in politicians, then you have switched from politics to religion. I believe politicians. I don't believe any politician. When he opens his mouth, look, that's where it stops. It's closer than that. That's my nose right here. So, it's a smell test. If you start believing politicians, you're in trouble already. But it's amazing that he would announce that he was no longer a Republican. Something, folks, can we talk? Anyone that is politically aligned with either one of these two parties, who are giving you what? And giving what to your children, your grandchildren. Your grandchildren, and not just your grandchildren, it's you too, but most of it's going to fall on the burden of the ones that's not yet able to apply an accountability to what they're doing, and we won't do it because we don't mind them putting the burden elsewhere. That's why they keep telling us about how much they're going to take from the rich, because we're not rich, and we don't know. Who cares about how it affects the other person unless it affects you? But it does affect you, because the money they've taken out of the hands of those persons who have, through their own effort, their own sweat equity, their own energy, and their own investment, and the will to take a chance out there in the marketplace. They're telling you they're going to take that and then transfer it to someone who doesn't have that investment in terms of the energy, the will, the skill level, and things of that sort. They're going to take it and give it to those to whom it doesn't belong. And you don't care because you're not one of the ones they're taking it from. And they know that. They know that the 1% and the 10%, they can go and attack them because they don't have the numbers to speak to the person otherwise. And so you don't see the connection between how that affects you, and you let them get away with that as they play the class card. And they do this in divisional stuff all the time, because that's how they stay in power as well. Okay, so that's another point I want to make, but let me finish up on Beck. So Beck is disappointed because in the 2014 election, we sent some more people up there that were outsiders. These were more or less Tea Party people, and they're going to go in there and make the correction. And they got in there, and we haven't heard from them since. And so Beck is now saying that we sent them up there to stop the train from coming down the track, rolling over the American people and the citizenship of the people that live here, and bringing people outside who broke into the country, violating immigration laws, and we want to put them on the path of citizenship. And we want to stop that because we're not endorsing that. American people don't want this to go on, and they made it very clear in the election 2010 and reiterated in 2014, and really to an extent in 2012 also. And so they get up there, and what happens? All the commitments they made, those commitments are rescinded once they take the oath. And there's a reason why that goes on. As you can see, it's not that they're pledging allegiance, quite frankly, to the Constitution. Those are the words they use. They're pledging allegiance really to the party politics and to big government. which is what the party stands for. There's only one party in Washington, and it has two different arteries to it, and one of those arteries is Democrat and other than Republican Party. Neither one is going to disavow the expansion of government power. That's what two parties stand for. So anyway, Glenn Beck was offended again. I don't know where he ever felt that anything else was going to take place that allowed him to park himself into one of the two parties. And they're camped out over there. I criticize blacks being camped out in the Democratic Party with nothing to show for it. But I criticize the conservatives for being camped out in the Republican Party. We need to understand that camping out in either party, neither one of the parties represented anybody in this country, except the political power that each party wields in the nation capital. Those parties have not been listening to us since 1913. And if you know it better than I do, once you pass the 17th Amendment, the state's voice was out of here, because the senators no longer represent the states. They represent the constituency inside the states that the federal government, in terms of the executive branch, can dismiss because it's the same constituency. It's just in the states, the constituency is housed within one of the 50 individual entities, political entities out there, where the nation itself is comprehensive that includes all 50 of those, but the electorate is the same folks. It wasn't intended to be that way. The House was intended to be going before the people on a more regular basis, but because the senators were elected by the state, it was designed to be, well, if you're serving the pledge of state, when the state disavows that you're not doing what you're sent there to do, they can just bring you back. So even though you're serving a 6-year term, that term was at the behest of the states who sent you there. And that would that's internal to the state in terms of making a decision to rescind your senatorial status. Now you have it to the election, then there's something else that kicks in. But that's how it was intended to operate. And once you took that away from what was intended by the framers, you mess with what the framers did, and they had a better idea what they're creating than any of you do. Certainly anybody in Washington does today. And you get this result that you got right now, where there's no accountability in Washington, none. There's no political accountability in Washington, D.C. And we get all bent out of shape. I know Ted Cruz just announced that he's running, and I heard on the way to the studio, everybody was so excited about, he didn't have, one of the commentators that comes on at 12 o'clock here in Flint was saying that people are going to were amazed he didn't use a teleprompter. And I agree that Cruz is a little bit more of a scholar than Obama is, but I don't think that there are going to be any solutions from Cruz. All we can hope the government will do is just get him out of the way.
I hate to say it at this point, the only solution I can see, and it's going to be drastic, is the system's going to implode. And then everybody else is going to be scrambling. And that's not a solution I advocate. Yeah. I just think that's the reality lurking about.
Yeah, it may take the and the collapse is inevitable on the road we're going. This idea, I was arguing last Monday on radio, that this idea that the economy, for example, is recovering is nonsense. This idea that you're recovering with 93 million people out of the workforce, you got the number of person on food stamps is increased by about 40%. There's now 50 million people receiving some. One in 5 persons, that's 20% of the population. The households, 1 in 5 households getting some kind of government assistance. 50 million people on welfare, 93 million people out of the workforce, and the debt has grown from what it was in 2008, where it stood at $10.6 trillion, is now standing at $18+ trillion a day. And this idea that the economy is improving under those conditions is absurd.
I mean, would they be so happy in toting this as a success if this is a Republican sitting in the office with the same numbers? No, they would not. They would not be doing
No, they wouldn't. And they were on Bush's case. for much less than what Obama is doing. And some of what Obama is doing, I wrote about this in my post today. Some of what Obama is doing is deliberate. There's no doubt. Look, when I say there's no doubt, I'm not talking about there's no doubt in my mind. There's no room to doubt what this president's doing based upon all of these circumstances. I mean, this last week he said that ISIS is a creation which is Bush's fault. And we didn't even hear about ISIS over the first 4 years of this president administration. We didn't even hear of ISIS.
Well, see, if he develops cancer in the future, it's Bush's fault as well.
That's Bush's fault too.
Yeah, see, everything's Bush's fault.
Nothing is Obama's fault.
And another thing is, every other president inherited a mess or some issues from the predecessor. I don't know why that should have been so.
That's where we take the other guy out.
I mean, if this guy doesn't understand that, then he should never ran for president.
There has been no president that's fixed all the nation's. I mean, this is absurd. There's been no president that's ever fixed all the nation's problems. So when the other person comes in, he's already inherited paradise. You're always going to have problems. And this president comes in acting like he's supposed to inherit a country where everything's already fixed. I mean, this is absurd. And that's what he's telling to the American people. That this is. I mean, for us to buy that, you have to be part of the Walking Dead to believe that what happened as of 12 noon, January 20th, 2009, that's when the president that's in office vacates the office, and the next president that's been voted into office is inaugurated. The two meet in a simultaneous time period. One is leaving the office and one takes off. The office is never vacated. As one is leaving, the other one is inaugurated. So whatever problems the one left that he didn't fix during his term, then the contiguous nature of the process is those problems are inherited in the next administration, so that administration then has to deal with those problems and resolve the issues that remain unresolved. And there'll always be some issues unresolved because there are no issues that are ever resolved in the political process. That's a little secret that's hidden. I mean, everybody's looking at these politicians to solve problems. They don't solve problems. They, in fact, have trade-offs of problems. They do something over here to create something else, something somewhere else. They don't fix. No problem is ever resolved in the political process. And what you do is that, and that's what they're doing with what they do with our money. They rob Peter, and then they go over here and pay Paul, and they come over and tell you to restore the money they took out over here, where Peter was. They want you to put the money back over here, so they can do what? They can do the same thing again and do what they did before. That's how the process, operates, and it's up to us to understand the process. And to say what? I won't put the adjective onto it, but the last part of it is no. And we have to say no repeatedly to these people because they expect us not to understand that we have the power to say no. You know what? One thing they did last week, they were talking about, voting. And I was doing an article on the voting that what really was the reason why they were fighting, the Democratic Party was fighting blacks in the South, was because of the blacks go to the polls and vote, and they're going to vote for Democrats. So Democrats were trying to keep blacks from the poll until they figured out how to, surround them and bring their vote back into heel so the Democrats in the South could stay in power. And what they did it through these persons out here that are still doing this misdirectional stuff like John Lewis and others who I called out in my post. And they found a way to do it, and that's why the blacks were allowed to go to the polls and vote. And then John Lewis and those persons who were out there that were fighting against not being allowed to vote went in and joined the party that had held them in abeyance over the course of the time period since 1870, when voting was institutionalized in the country for all of the male citizens. Certainly, we didn't have the women involved until the passage of the 20th Amendment the 19th Amendment in 1920. But for all intents and purposes, you couldn't deny the vote based upon race, creed, national origin, color, and things of that sort, or previous condition of servitude, and that would have given the power of blacks to vote. But they kept blacks from voting because in the South they knew exactly what was going to happen there. They weren't vote for these former slave owners and slave catchers, and so they had to find a remedy for that, and that was in fact to keep blacks from the poll. But look what they did once the 65 bill was passed, and look what John Lewis and them did. They went and got blacks, corralled them and got them going to vote for the Democratic Party. Now we had last week where Obama is so cat enough, he wants to make, they're floating the idea out to see how it plays. This is kind of like what they did with Mark Anthony and Julius Caesar, where they were getting ready to, John, are you aware of when Mark Anthony and Julius Caesar were trying to see if the people would buy making Caesar king and get rid of the Republican form of government, that Mark Anthony put a crown on Julius Caesar's head, and to see how the people felt about it, and they did this. You remember that?
Yeah, and they haven't. Things haven't changed. They're basically, we're going to push it. See if we can push this past them. That's what it is.
If you understand that, you saw the floating of the idea, right? In other words, they're floating around the idea to make it mandatory. So we have to. So they make it mandatory. They're gonna make it mandatory. Force us to vote for them. So so you won't have the choice to go and vote for your rulers, quote unquote.
I guess in Australia it's mandatory to vote.
Yeah,
I don't know how
85% of them vote in Australia by the mandatory voting, and then the others have to pay a certain fine for it, like $20, and if you don't pay it, then it goes up.
But it's like, this guy probably wants you thrown in prison over it.
Yeah, I mean, it's offensive for you to say. I mean, what if the people have an objection, and I have an objection for either party? They're both corrupt. But
well, it's like, because they don't want you to actually. I mean, I think even the communist countries, they had none of the above as a selection on the ballot.
Let me explain why that is being floated. Because it's dangerous for people to stay outside the political process. Malcolm X was saying in 1964, he was saying the ballot of the bullet. If people don't use the ballot and they're dissatisfied, and you can't get them to embrace the ballot as an agent of change, not that the ballot is an agency of change, it's a status quo agency, then there's some problems it creates for the politicians. And so I'm not surprised they're floating around, but think about Mark Anthony and Julius Caesar's, where they did this to the idea, and think about what that meant. And now they're telling us that we have the right, they want to make, they're floating the idea that they make voting in this country mandatory. In other words, they want to force you to participate, because once you participate, you're part of you're part of the apparatus of the political apparatus, which you're not able to vote for. And they don't put on the ballot until they run out of options where they put something on the ballot you can vote for, where you actually are controlling some of the things that you can modify some of the influences of politicians in your life, particularly as it relates to your pocketbook. Let me see them let us vote upon the income tax. How many of us would vote to get rid of the income tax, which we didn't have that until 1913 with passage of the 16th Amendment? How many persons would vote for them taxing your income, your earnings? That's not going to be on the ballot. And they're not intending to allow you to vote for it, nor on a whole host of other issues. You vote for your rulers, and then they decide everything else.
I had this argument last Sunday, not this Sunday, but the past Sunday, with some guy at church. He's basically saying, well, we're not slaves. You can take comfort in that. And I went, okay, we're going to justify our existence to a government for how much money we make and how much. I said, how is that not slavery? How is that not slavery? We can't keep the benefits of our own work. We can't keep what we derive from our own labor. We can't keep.
The hidden factor that slavery is no longer individuated. People can't recognize that when you're working for someone else, we look at it in terms of two things. One is that there's got to be a cotton field somewhere, and there's got to be an individuated person. It's got to be individuated to a single individual. A slave owner. But if there's no cotton field and there's no individuation, it does not mean that there's no slavery, because the slavery is the entire network, and the enslavement is that of tax enslavement. And that's what this philosopher in Canada is talking about. This wonderful thinker named Stefan Molyneux is talking about when he talks about the people of what we are is tax cattle. When we are grazing on the land, our houses are there, but have you noticed that we don't even own anything? And and you're paying taxes on everything that you do. So the chattel slavery, the context has been changed and altered, but the enslavement itself has not changed. It's just another way in which it's designed to result in the same ends. And you see that in terms of the fact that, see, if you can't make property in a country certain, and property ownership certain in the country, then you can't have individual liberty certain either, because Rand has pointed this out in her works, and that is, if there is no private property, then there cannot be individual rights, because the individual rights are based upon private property ownership. And that is always uncertain, because if you don't pay for the taxes, then you know what happens to your property. It's confiscated by the state. And everything they're doing. I mean, they talked about how in Ferguson they were. I read Holder's report, 105-page report, and he was saying that the people down there are using traffic tickets in order to grow the income of the state, and really the city of Ferguson. And that is not just true of Ferguson. That's true of you saw it in New York with Eric Garner, and you see it here in Flint, where I am. That's how it operates. I mean, you get stopped for you better not speed out there. You pay if you get stopped for speeding. I don't care what the speed, how much speed you're doing over the limit. You're paying a car note. They're doing that in all the states, and that's what Eric Garner was about. He's out there selling cigarettes. A pack of cigarettes in New York costs $13 a pack. $7 of that is the amount of the cigarettes that the packages of the cigarettes, they charge that much money. That's enough right there. But another $5 plus is tacked onto that, where the city is getting its cut, and the state's getting its cut. And he's out there selling cigarettes, and he's tapping into the tax base of the city and state, and they send their horsemen out there, their posse out there to stop it. And then when the guy is arrested and taken down and dies of a heart attack because he was asthmatic and he died later on a heart attack, they want to act like the police killed him. I mean, this is the kind of thing that goes on in the political process. The police get blamed for the political acts, and de Blasio and all the others, these people have no character. But they're politicians, and what do you expect? And Glenn Beck, you out there talking about you're no longer a Republican. I can't understand what you were doing in that party in the first place, parked in there, and why the Democrats are parked in the party they're in. Ain't neither one of the parties anything. And anybody that doesn't understand that, I feel sorry for you, because you don't have anything to base a claim upon that they're representing you. You've not been represented by the parties since 1913. And you can forget that. You're on your own. And I hate to tell you this, because if you don't know it by now, and you don't know this has been dismissed, this is the Constitution of the United States, this has been thrown out of here. This don't even apply to them. When they put the internet on the Bible, swear to the Constitution, and the next day they dismiss it. And they continue to do that. John's giving me the signal. We got 1 minute, John? You got to wrap it up? Okay, John telling me to get out of here. We got the Sartorius Black History Corner coming up at 3:30. I have to run home to see it. And I watch it live every day. I want you to stay tuned to it. It comes on at 3:30. Stays around until around 4 o'clock, sometimes a little bit later when they get really going with the good things they talk about. I want you to stay tuned to all the programs. And don't forget to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.